My dear people at Our Lady of the Woods, how are you doing? This is our fifth Sunday of Lent. And so as I shared with you this whole time, we are on a, journey. I hope you said that by now, because each of my homilies during Lent has been about this famous Lenten journey. It's almost like when, you get your little boarding pass. And we all have seen these before. Of course, now a lot of times they're on our iPhone and we just walk up and, the line crosses it. But in that boarding pass, the first one, it says, passenger, each of us. Destination, Easter. Duration, 40 days. Date, 2020. Time, Lent. And then it's interesting because it says transportation. A car, an airplane, or a cruise ship. I put another one. I put our heart. That's our transportation. On our Lenten journey, we can't take a plane. We can't take a cruise ship. We can't take a railroad. We can't take a car. Our destination has to be completed through our heart. And so in that first Sunday of Lent, the destination was the wilderness. And then, of course, we have another boarding pass. That second boarding pass was the mountaintop. What was the duration? 1 week. And then we had another boarding pass. That was the well with the Samaritan woman. Remember? Third Sunday of Lent. And then we continued on for a duration of 1 week. And then we get another boarding pass. The pool of Siloam. And of course, we go there with the blind man. And of course, now this week, our destination causes us to stop on the fifth Sunday of Lent at a tomb. A tomb. The tomb of Lazarus. I don't know if you've heard one of these rock songs, but one of the songs that always struck my mind was this title of a song called Living Tomb. Almost sounds like an oxymoron, huh? Living Tomb. And it struck me because I think that's the kind of tomb that Lazarus points to you and me in our own relationship, that we see that he has his relationship with Jesus, and you and I then have our relationship. And it's almost like there's those living tombs of our lives. Tombs where we're called to go for a while, a short time. A tomb sometimes kinds of takes us away from something, maybe the ordinary moments of our life. A tomb is somewhere where we feel isolated or alone or abandoned. It almost seems like the coronavirus has forced us into these living tombs. And so on this fifth Sunday of Lent, we're at this moment on our Lenten journey at a destination called the tomb, and we've got Lazarus with us. And what I find interesting there is that one author, Rachel Gableman, calls the Lazarus life a life of unhurried existence. For you and I to try to enter into our own moment of a tomb, I like what she said there, that a tomb is like an unhurried existence. And I think what better way could we have ever understood this than what we're going through right now? In many ways, we're in this unhurried existence through not being able to go to work, some of us, through some of us staying, and we're told to stay in our homes unless it's necessary to get out. And all of that points to this unhurried existence. This moment where you and I look to the tomb moments of our lives. I'd like to share with you a little what I thought Lazarus, if he were in that tomb at the moment, what he might be saying. And in the tomb, imagine the voice of Lazarus saying the following. I keep thinking back on that day as I lay in the total blackness of that tomb. I was in darkness. Jesus said that he came into this world as a light so that no one who believes in him should stay in the darkness. Some people are alive, yet they live in darkness. They were without the knowledge of my Savior, Jesus. This Jesus who is my Lord and my Redeemer. My relationship. That relationship with Jesus is what has given me new life. I am truly free in only the way Jesus can make me free. For he is the way, the truth, and the life. That's what we have to come to terms to in the tomb moments of our own journeys. That moment where we have to realize, and I think in the gospel today, there's 3 moments that I find very interesting. Well, and before those 3 moments, there's a little prelude. First of all, Jesus is told that a dear friend has died. Does he go rushing to the tomb? No. He comes a little later on. And I couldn't help but think that Martha and Mary would be a little disappointed with that. They would have expected him to have been right there. And I think that's the first moment we have to kind of connect with in our own tomb moments with Jesus. Jesus won't necessarily come to us at the very moment we want or expect. Jesus sometimes takes his time. Jesus sometimes in each of our own lives won't come as though it's at the snap of a finger. But Jesus will come. And he did come. And it's interesting because Martha says, oh my gosh, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And yet Jesus says, but do you believe? What are you rushing about? And it's even this, I find this very human moment from Martha going, well, you know, Jesus, if you had been here. And what does Jesus then say? It's very interesting. Amongst the whole discussion, he goes into take away the stone, remove the stone. And of course, like most humans' response, Martha says, oh my gosh, you may not want to do that. It's going to stink. But Jesus says, move the stone. And I think sometimes in our tomb moments of our lives, those experiences where we feel away from people, distant from them. Somehow we don't feel connected in whatever the moment is. Sometimes we feel like we're in our own little world, away from everyone and everything else. We kind of hide in our own little comfort zone. You know, it's that Cinderella movie that's got that song, in my own little corner, in my own little bed, I would love to see what I can be. And so we have our own little corner, the tomb moment. And Jesus says, take away the stone. And we have to have the courage to allow Jesus to take our stones away. What is the stone maybe in my own life right now that's blocking the entrance for me to have some new life? Is it the stone of frustration? Is it the stone of kind of just being tired about this whole situation we find ourselves in? There's all kinds of stones that block our tomb. And yet Jesus comes on the other side of it. And he says, roll that stone away. But the next moment I found that's very interesting is that, what does he do then? He says, Lazarus, come out. He called Lazarus by name. He calls you and I by name. He calls you and I to come out of the tombs of our own apathy, the tombs of our own restlessness, the tombs of our own doubt and fears and anxieties. He calls us by name. Come out, come out. And then I find very interesting at the very end, when Lazarus is coming out with those burial cloths around him, what does Jesus say? Untie him and let him go. Unbind him and let him go. That's the challenge. We too at times need others to help us in our lives. We too need at moments to allow others into our lives. We can't always do it alone. It's not always about us. It's not about me alone. And so in these tomb moments, we have to be vulnerable. We have to take a risk to allow other people to help us, to untie us, as Jesus says, and let us go free. I find it interesting. I was thinking about what would it be like to live in a tomb? And Reuters, the Reuters news service a few years ago, did something very interesting. They actually went and they found someone who lives in a tomb. And in 2013, in the village of Nis, Serbia, a reporter went by the name of Marko, And he found this man who actually was living in a tomb. The man's name was Bratislav. And in the southern city of Nis from Serbia, this Bratislav decided to live in a tomb. He was a construction worker. He all of a sudden didn't have a job. He walked around. He was a person on the streets. He tried to find, anything he could do to survive. And one day he walked into the cemetery. He walked into the graveyard. And there were at the time these old abandoned candles. And he started to pick up these old half-used candles to use them for his own moments and evenings and at nighttime. And then he realized that the cemetery had these open tombs. Tombs that had cracked open, doors that had kind of, just through time, kind of moved into a certain direction that you could kind of crawl through. And he decided that he wanted, and that he had no other choice but to go and live in an open tomb. He said the following, he says, "I first slept in the open of the cemetery, but it was cold, and I decided then to enter this one open tomb. And the concrete slab was open, so I went in." As he was sharing about this moment, he said something that I felt was very interesting. He says at the very end of his whole experience of living in the tomb, he says, people, I usually, when I go to leave my tomb, I make an announcement. I kind of say, "Hello," because I don't want anyone being scared if they see me leaving this tomb. And so I make this announcement that I'm coming out. And I think there's something there for you and I in that message. That in our moments where Jesus tells us to come out, calls us by name, and we have the courage and strength to ask other people to help untie us and let us go, we announce that. I'm coming out. I'm ready. We don't want anyone to be frightened by anything we should leave behind. And as I was looking at this whole life of a tomb, I also found some very interesting stories. If you go to Cairo, Egypt, there's an area of Cairo known as the City of the Dead, where there are graveyards. And in the graveyards are permanent residents trying to live their lives as normally as possible. Sabrine, a mother of 3, says, "At the beginning it seemed very hard and difficult to live here. After some time you get accustomed to it. It becomes normal." But this is what struck me about Sabrine's remark about living in these graveyards in the City of the Dead of Cairo. She said, "Sometimes I feel we are both dead, but we are still not buried," as she talks about her and her child. "Sometimes I feel we are both dead, but we are still not buried." And again, it reminds you and I of when we go to the moments of those tombs of our own lives. Moments where we feel we're dead, but we're still not buried. There's something that still remains, that's not totally or fully resolved. And it just struck me about if I'm living in a tomb. So we hear from a young man in Serbia. We hear about this city of the graves in Cairo. And I got very caught up in thinking about, what are other modern moments of living in tombs? And there was even a story from Manila where there are a number of Filipinos who live in different cemeteries. One woman, Elvira Miranda, says, "I've lived in here for 51 years, and I've been trying to leave for 51 years. There's some truth to that. When we're in the tomb, we know that we're living there, but we also need to leave it. And I find that she herself was sharing about her own struggles, where she found safety in the tomb. She found a certain peacefulness in the tomb. She says it's free, but she also reminds not only her family and the others there, but the rest of the world, that there are no basic services there. She says, only a shelter. And she just looks And it was interesting in the article, she says, and this is where I'm at, where I am living, but where I need to go. That tension, that struggle. And so today, my dear people, we've got that boarding pass. The boarding pass of living in the tomb. But there's one more boarding pass, and that's next week. The destination next week, the boarding pass shows us the city of Jerusalem. I hope you come back. Come back and let's complete the journey from the tomb to Jerusalem. God bless you.